All right, let's talk real estate. When you see a massive new building go up, you've got to know it's not just one person's money on the line. There are always two key players, two investors with completely different stories. And that's what we're diving into today, the lender versus the owner. So think about it. You see this giant skyscraper, right? Who's really on the hook if something goes wrong? I mean, who's actually taking the big risk here? It's a simple question, but the answer really gets to the core of how these massive deals get done. And here's the thing. It's not just one person. Nope, it's always two. You've got two main financial players who are in two completely different worlds. They have different goals, different worries, different rewards. Their fates are tied together, for sure, but their stories? Totally different. Okay, so let's meet our cast of characters. In one corner, you have the lender. That's the credit side of the deal. And in the other corner, you've got the owner. That's the equity side. Credit and equity. You're going to want to remember those two words. They are key to, well, everything. So here's the best way to think about this. The lender, they're basically the toll booth operator on a bridge, right? They don't really care how awesome the party is on the other side. They just want to collect their toll, that loan payment, every single time. No drama. But the owner, they're the ones throwing the party. If it's a massive hit, they get all the glory and the profit. But if nobody shows up, they're the ones left with the bill and all the risk. All right, so we know who's who. Now let's do what we always do. Follow the money. Because when you see how the risk and the rewards are split, you really start to see the totally different realities these two investors live in. And really, this all boils down to one key concept, operational risk. Now, this isn't some high-level thing like a market crash. No, this is the down and dirty, day-to-day stuff. Are you signing new tenants? Is the HVAC system on the fritz? Did the roof just spring a leak? It's the risk that comes from actually running the show. You see, the lender's whole world is built on predictability. They make a loan, let's say it's 6% interest, and that's it. That's their return. It is capped. If the owner is some kind of genius and doubles the building's income, does the lender get a bonus? Nope, not a single extra penny. They just get their 6% steady as she goes. And check this out. It really drives the point home. Let's say the property's income shoots up by 30%, maybe because of some really smart management. The lender's return? Flat as a pancake. But the equity owner, they get to keep all of that growth, every last bit. This imbalance, this asymmetry, it is at the heart of the entire thing. Okay, so if equity gets all the good stuff, what about the bad stuff? Well, you guessed it. The equity investor takes the hit first. They're in what's called the first loss position. If a pipe bursts and it's a $10,000 fix, that money comes straight out of the owner's pocket. The lender, they only even start to worry about losing money in a complete total disaster scenario, like the owner defaults and the building is suddenly worth less than the loan. All right, CRE is great, but let's make this real. How does this operational risk stuff actually play out in the real world? Let's walk through a couple of super common examples. Okay, scenario one. Imagine you get a call from the property manager, and it's bad news. The roof is leaking badly, and it's going to cost a ton of money to replace. So, how do our two investors react? This is where the rubber really meets the road. You see their totally different motivations clash. The lender's brain has one thought: protect my collateral, right? So they say, you need to spend that $2 million and replace the entire roof right now. But the owner, they're thinking about ROI. They're thinking, can we just patch it for a while? I'd much rather sink that $2 million into a fancy new lobby that lets me jack up the rents. And this tension, it's a constant back and forth in their relationship. All right, on to scenario two. A brand new tenant wants to sign a lease. This is great news, right? Everyone wins. Well, not so fast. The devil is in the details, and those details mean very different things to our two players. And this is so important to get. Let's say the lease is for $30 a square foot, or maybe it's $28. For the lender, either one is fine. The loan payment is covered, no problem. But for the equity owner, whoa, that $2 difference is not a small thing. It could literally be a 7% hit to their entire return on the project. It just goes to show how incredibly sensitive the owner's investment is to these tiny operational details that the lender might not even blink at. So you might be wondering, if the lenders aren't in the trenches dealing with leaky roofs and lease negotiations, how on earth do they protect themselves from all this risk? Well, they're smart. They build a fortress of protections right into the loan documents from day one. And this is their toolkit for building that fortress. They use things called loan covenants, which are basically just strict rules the owner has to follow, like you must keep occupancy above 90%. They make the owner set up reserve accounts, basically a forced savings account for future repairs. And sometimes they even have recourse, which is the legal power to go after the owner's personal money if things really go sideways. Okay, now let's talk about one of their biggest weapons, the cash sweep. Here's how this works. Let's say the property's income dips below a certain level that was agreed upon in the loan. Boom, a covenant is triggered. And that triggers the sweep. All of a sudden, the lender can legally grab all the extra cash the property is generating, so instead of that cash going into the owner's pocket as profit, it's now being used to pay down the loan faster. It's a massive deal for the owner, but for the lender, it's just a really smart defensive move. Okay, so we've gone through all of this. Why does it matter? Why is this distinction between credit and equity so incredibly important? Let's just boil it down to the big takeaway for anyone thinking about investing in real estate. It really all comes down to this. If you're a debt investor, your main job is to avoid big mistakes. You're not looking for a superstar operator, you're just looking for someone who's competent and reliable. Your job is to pick the right horse and then build that fortress of loan protections around your investment. But if you're an equity investor, you are the operator. Your success or failure, your returns, it all comes down to how well you can run that property every single day. And right here you can see exactly what that risk is worth. Lenders, they're targeting a nice, steady, predictable 8 to 10%. But equity investors, they need to see a path to 15, 20, maybe even 25% returns or more, or they won't even touch the deal. And that huge gap, what we call the equity premium, that's not just finance jargon. That is the price they demand for taking on 100% of that messy, unpredictable operational risk we've been talking about. There's a saying that just sums this all up perfectly. The best equity investors are operators. The best debt investors are underwriters of operators. It just says it all, doesn't it? One person is an expert at doing the job, and the other is an expert at judging the people who do the job. They're two sides of the same coin, but they require completely different skills. So, next time you're walking down the street and you see a big office building or a new apartment complex going up, ask yourself this: what do you see? Do you see the safe, steady toll booth on the bridge? Or do you see the risky, chaotic, but potentially high-reward party going on inside? Because when it comes to investing in real estate, understanding that fundamental difference, well, it's everything.